Hi there, I'm the Mythkeeper. Welcome back to my channel. Last week we talked about the humans of Golarion, and this week we're continuing our series about the Ancestries of Pathfinder, and we're talking about elves. According to 538, elves are the second most popular player character race after humans, and the third most popular is half-elves, which is really just another kind of elf. So elves are very, very popular. Today we're going to do a deep dive into what makes the elves of the Pathfinder role-playing setting unique, but also what makes them classically elves. I hope you enjoy it.
Elves in Pathfinder, and in Dungeons & Dragons, like dwarves, halflings, and orcs as well, owe a good deal to the writings of J.R.R. Tolkien. So before we jump into the Elves of Golarion, I want to take a step back and talk about the influence of Tolkien's work. Terry Pratchett, author of the popular Discworld series, said of Tolkien's influence, J.R.R. Tolkien has become a sort of mountain, appearing in all subsequent fantasy in the way that Mount Fuji appears so often in Japanese prints. Sometimes it's big and close. Sometimes a shape on the horizon. Sometimes it's not there at all, which means that the artist either has made a deliberate decision against the mountain, which is interesting in and of itself, or is in fact standing on Mount Fuji. In the case of Dungeons & Dragons, the mountain is very big and very close. Just how big? Well, in 1976, just a year prior to the release of Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, Gary Gygax and his team were planning to include hobbits in the new edition of the game. Then, TSR was served with papers threatening damages on behalf of the Tolkien estate due to a legal claim on some of Tolkien's terms. The action also demanded TSR remove Balrog, dragon, dwarf, elf, ent, goblin, hobbit, orc, and warg from the D&D game. This became a negotiation, so they kept the terms dragon, elf, dwarf, goblin, and orc, because those terms predated Tolkien's work, but conceded the other terms, changing the names of the offending words, such as hobbit turning into halfling. Despite the superficial name changes, the original races of D&D owe everything to Tolkien's work, sharing similar physical attributes like size, strength, longevity, as well as cultural practices and appearance. Elves, for example, in traditional Germanic folklore, were tiny creatures, like fairies, that dwelt in the woods and were noted for their mischief and volatility. Tolkien's conception of elves was very different. Tolkien's elves are tall, taller even than humans. They are a graceful, noble people, almost a precursor people to mankind, and closer in their relationship to the elder spirits or gods, and to the natural world around them. They are gifted in crafts and magic and science, and they do not die of old age as humans do. In Tolkien's conception, the age of the elves was coming to an end, and the age of man was to be the future of this world. The elves were retreating from the mortal world to live with the elder spirits in a mythical land called Valinor. They reached these lands by sailing a special path open only to them from the shores and the western reaches of Middle-earth. In Pathfinder, we see many of these concepts remain in the game world, but are changed in some crucial ways. Let's start with the physical attributes. In Pathfinder, elves are tall, lean humanoids who were taller but more slender in build than humans. Their natural lifespan is measured in centuries rather than decades. Elves are often elegant in both appearance and movement, possessing an almost supernatural grace. Elven ears are famously pointed. They are generally between 6 to 9 inches in length and lean backwards, angling upward slightly to end usually parallel to the crown of the head. All of this they share in common with Tolkien's elves, but they have some unique features as well. In Pathfinder, elven irises differentiate them from elves of other settings. These are far larger than those of other humanoids, often making it seem like they have little or no white in their eyes. This trait can make elves seem alien and unreadable to humans and dwarves. Pathfinder elves share a lot culturally with Tolkien's elves as well, including an affinity for magic and a deep connection with their environment. One of the unique ways that connection manifests itself is a showcase of another unique difference between the Elves of Golarion and other elves in fantasy fiction. Pathfinder elves show some of the greatest diversity of any of the peoples of Golarion, and that's in part because they can slowly change with their environment, like some form of Lamarckian evolution. The Innersea World Guide describes it like this. Elves tend to take on many of the features of the environments in which they dwell. This change is gradual, usually taking hundreds of years to fully manifest. But over only the course of a single human generation, an elf's appearance and even abilities can change dramatically. This means that elves that hail from temperate woodlands appear very differently from their counterparts located along the coasts and seas, or deep underground, or in deserts, or in jungles, or in the frozen north. I love this unique biological fact about the Elves of Golarion, although it's certainly not the weirdest or most unique thing about them. One of the concepts that seems to come from Tolkien is the notion that elves come from someplace else, that they are not native to this world. The kernel of this idea is in use in Pathfinder. The Elves of Pathfinder, however, do not come from a magical dimension or a fey dimension, as perhaps you might expect. They come from another planet. They are, in fact, aliens. Adjacent to the planet of Golarion is the planet of Castrovel, and on Castrovel is a land populated by elves called Vourinoi. This is the homeland of the elves. It continues to be the heart of elvendom. Should there ever be another crisis like the Earthfall cataclysm, one can imagine that the elves would once again retreat to the safety of their own world. Elves vary as much in character and disposition as humans do. But if one had to generalize, one could characterize elves as a light-hearted people. Among their own kind, they love to laugh, play pranks, and try things on a whim. Despite their long lifespans, they are not always noted for their wisdom, and on occasion recklessly disregard dangers or consequences. It is a mistake, however, to view elves as thoughtless or uncaring. Most elves make friends easily and value them highly. They are said to feel things more acutely than humans, and especially feel a profound sense of loss when losing a loved one. Many elves are superb artists, cartographers, scribes, herbalists, tailors, and performers. Elven artisans make their livelihoods with such skills when dwelling among other races. Elves honor almost every god of Golarion, but the majority worship Calistria or Desna, with smaller numbers venerating Nethys, or even more obscure elven deities, or even fey deities. Elves have ample time on their hands to find spiritual fulfillment, so they may not always venerate the same deities throughout their lives. Elves see gods as their guides and inspirations in life, with swift and simple daily devotions being a part of their overall life and spiritual practice. Let's move to the history of the elves now. Elves are an ancient people, whose civilization dates back tens of thousands of years. The homeland of the elves is called Vourinoi, and it exists on the world of Castrovel. Their civilization was well established by the time of humanity's prehistory, and they had built cities, they had kings and queens, practiced advanced magic, and had sophisticated cultures long before the first human settlements were ever formed on Golarion. During the period of time in Golarion known as the Age of Serpents, elven legend tells of a master wizard and artisan known as Candlaron the Sculptor. He created a magical crystal called the Severian Stone, an artifact that acted like a magical battery, capable of storing and conducting a massive amount of magical energy. He then used the power of the crystal to build the first Aiudara, the Elven Waygate. It is Candlaron that first led a group of elves into the world of Golarion some 15,000 years ago. And though many elves followed him into the New World, the ultimate fate of Candlaron the Sculptor is unknown. It is said that in his waning years he stepped through a secret gate to an unknown destination and was never seen again. The secret of creating the Elf Gates was lost with him. Candlaron and his people settled originally in two woodland realms during the Age of Serpents, Ilverani in the east and Kionin in the west. They were not content to just remain there, however. During the Age of Serpents, Candlaron and his people constructed a network of gates all across Golarion. There are almost 20 Aiudara known to exist on Golarion, but they fell into disuse when the elves fled the world. Not all of these gates remain active to this day, but here are all the known gates in Golarion. As many elf records were destroyed during the Cataclysm, there may be more gates not yet rediscovered. Let's do a quick run-through of the known gates, starting in the elven capital of Kionin and moving out from there in a roughly counterclockwise spiral. The largest collection of gates are in the nation of Kionin itself. The first gate ever built was the Lotus Gate, located in the capital city of Aiudara. Also in Kionin is the Lantern Gate, near the city of Avenara, and the Tangle Gate, located in Tanglebriar Swamp. Just below Kionin, in the dwarf lands of the Five King Mountains, there is the Jewel Gate, near the city of Kovlar. Then, moving east, The Galt Gate can be found in the Borewood Forest. Moving north up to Mendev is the Eidolon Gate, originally built by the elves who settled in the Estrovian forest, but now occupied by Kelid tribes. Further north still is the Ice Gate, situated in the crown of the world. Heading south and west, we reach the Kelwynvian Gate, which is located in the abandoned Mirani elf capital of Kelwynvian. Continuing south and east is the Spire Gate, which is found in the Mordant Spire. The Mordant Spire houses a culturally unique group of elves called the Grey Elves, which we'll discuss in more detail later. South of the Mordant Spire is the island of Hermia, where we find another old elf gate, the Venge Gate. Further south and a little west, we get back to the Avestinian coastline, and we find two more gates. The Dream Gate is held by the Sea Elves of the Akisazi tribe, while the Call Gate is found below the nation of Nidal. The Alteran Gate is found below Citadel Alteran, the former headquarters of the Hell Knights of the Order of the Nail. It was once the center of a group of gates called Alceta's Ring. In northwestern Andoran, deep below the surface of the earth, is the Darklands Gate, which connects to the Drow settlement of Blackstrand. Traversing south across the Inner Sea, in northeastern Rahadum, there is the Breach Gate. Near Whitebridge Station in the Mwangi Expanse is the Hunter Gate, and then, even further south in the Kava lands, near Sengor is the Worm Gate. Finally, in eastern Garand, near the city of Finderplain in Katapesh, one can find the last Ayudara in the Inner Sea, the Dusk Gate. Elf gates are activated using a key, which can be a physical token, but might also be a password, piece of music, spell, or even a stellar conjunction. Some gates have multiple keys, each linked to another specific elf gate. Many elf gate keys have been forgotten over the millennia, and therefore some elf gates have been abandoned. Only the first traveler in a group needs a key. The rest can follow that traveler to the same destination. Travel through an elf gate is instantaneous, and as you can see, the Elven Gate Network covered much of the Inner Sea region at one time. Because of this, the Ayudara represent a significant part of the elves' historic power, as it allowed them to move people and goods with incredible speeds across vast distances. Elven power in Golarion did not last, however. When the Earthfall Cataclysm occurred, most elves were forewarned of the coming apocalypse, and they made their escape to Severian. This occurred in the year -5293. The elves that fled to their homeworld wouldn't return to Golarion for almost 8,000 years. They might never have returned at all if it wasn't for events that occurred in the old abandoned kingdom of Kionin beyond their control. A demon lord, known as the Lord of the Blasted Tarn, had been exiled from the Abyss to the material world of Golarion during the Age of Darkness. That demon lord discovered the abandoned elven kingdom of Kionin in the year 2497. When he learned of the power of the elven crystal called the Severian Stone, the demon lord conducted a plan to obtain it and turn it into a permanent portal to the Abyss. In 2632, the elves detected this plan and returned to Golarion to stop him. They dubbed the demon lord Tree Raiser, the title by which he is most commonly known today, and they drove him away from the heart of Kionin into Tanglebriar Swamp, but they have been unable to destroy him. The returning elves rebuilt the nation of Kionin and re-established the capital city of Ayudara. These elves are called the Aiudeen, or sometimes called the Returned, and they are ruled over by Queen Telendia Edesaril of Kionin. In the 2,000 years since the return of the Aiudeen, they have succeeded in securing Kionin and keeping Tree Raiser at bay. They have also attempted to retake the eastern elven capital of Kelwynvian, but it had since been occupied by the Drow. A terrible war was fought in the Mirani forest for that city, but the destroyed city was eventually abandoned by both sides, and it remains empty and forbidden to this day. The Aiudeen do not represent all of Elvendom, however. Many elves remained in Golarion and survived the Earthfall Cataclysm, and they settled in various places around the world. Many appear quite different from their Aiudeen king, and have adopted quite different cultures and customs. Now, let's move on and talk about all the various elven subgroups, where they are principally located, and what makes them unique. First, let's start with a group I've already discussed some, the Aiudeen, the Returners. To most Innersea residents, all elven culture is Aiudeen culture, filled with glamorous clothing, arcane prowess, and elegant twisting architecture. Yet, though Aiudeen culture is highly sophisticated, it has historically been in decline since the elves returned. The war with the Tree Razor has left its mark. The Aiudeen do not wish to return to Sovereign anymore, and consider themselves distinct now from the Soveriani. They are permanently settled in Golarion. Yet the Aiudeen have really struggled to reclaim what they once held, and they have struggled to defend what they've managed to secure. The current generations of Aiudeen have had to become more warlike than their forebears, and for a people that feel loss as acutely as the elves, this has been culturally and personally taxing. Aiudeen are primarily a temperate woodland and forest people, and are the closest to what we might think of as traditional Tolkien elves. They are often fair-haired and fair-featured, though, even in Sovereign, the elves have developed a wide range of features, so the Aiudeen may not all fit this stereotype. After the Aiudeen, the second most common subgroup are the Forlorn. The earliest Forlorn were the orphaned children of elves who refused to abandon Golarion from the predicted devastation wrought by Earthfall. The Forlorn are elves that grew up in non-elf communities, most typically in human communities. Because of the extraordinary imbalance in life expectancy between them and their adopted families, they tend towards melancholy. It is not uncommon for members of the Forlorn to travel from place to place once they reach maturity, fleeing from a home they perceive as being tainted by death. Forlorn are prized, and often hired as guards, by merchants and caravan leaders for their innate perceptiveness and extensive experience traveling the world. For reasons of their propensity for travel, the Forlorn tend to favor deities of travel, particularly Desna. Forlorn can be found in every corner of Golarion. Now let's move from north to south across the innersea, discussing the groups found there as we go. First, the Ilverani, also known as the Snow Elves. Living in the most hostile reaches of the crown of the world, the Ilverani are starkly marked by their frost-white skin and hair, as well as their affinity for blue clothes and silver armor. They live among elven ruins in the frozen wastes, holding in extreme religious reverence for the places they call home. For the most part, they are as cold and unyielding as the ice that surrounds them, willing to do good for others, but seemingly incapable of behaving warmly to non-elves. The one exception are the Twilight Speakers, Ilverani, who believe that reaching out to and befriending other peoples is a religious duty of their patron goddess, Fin de la Dlara, the elven goddess of art and architecture. The Grey Elves, also known as the Spiresworn Elves. An offshoot of the Aiudeen Elves, Spiresworn are elves who reside within the Mordant Spire, a strange tower that grew in the place where the falling body of Akavna, the Aslanti goddess of the moon and battle, who died during the Earthfall trying to defend her people, had crashed into the earth. The tower whispered to them in a dead god's voice, and within these divine whispers, the Spiresworn found a calling. Now considering themselves the true heirs of Aslant, the elves settled in the Mordant Spire and cut themselves off from the rest of the world. After generations of this isolation, the elves of the Mordant Spire have become secretive and xenophobic, bizarre even to their former brethren. Often refusing to speak anything but Aslanti, they wear elaborate wooden masks whenever dealing with outsiders, and they often change the subject or stop speaking mid-sentence, cocking their heads as if listening to an inaudible voice. Beneath their masks, Spiresworn elves often have white hair and violet eyes. They have a wide range of skin tones, but their complexion is often ashen from a lack of light. Spiresworn rarely leave their island for any reason beyond patrolling Aslanti ruins, defending them from explorers seeking to claim ancient secrets. As a result, Spiresworn are rarely seen as adventurers. In recent years, however, some of these elves have found themselves grudgingly forced to work with others to face larger Algolthu threats, and thus they have been pulled into worldly affairs. The Vourinoi, also known as the Desert Elves. The elves of the desert oases of Osirian and nearby lands, the Vourinoi, are often unknown to any but those travelers and nomads who pass by a Vourinoi oasis, but the few who encounter these elves find them a gregarious and welcoming people. The oasis elves know how inimical to life their homes can be, and they eagerly welcome and mingle with travelers in need of water and shelter. Vourinoi learn from birth to be charming, eloquent, and hospitable, and when conflict arises, most would rather talk than fight. Vourinoi are easily identified by their rich brown skin and black hair, though individual elves might have vivid blue, green, or white hair as well. Vourinoi consider themselves separate from the nations they occupy, and their friendliness belies a deep and fierce independence. Given their reputation for skill at both magic and desert warfare, the rulers of the desert lands have little desire to infringe upon the elves' homes. In addition, the Vourinoi consider themselves the sole stewards of their oases, and any attempts to control or corrupt the life-giving sites draws the elves' fury. Despite their love for their homes, Vourinoi also share a great sense of wanderlust, even by elven standards. Like their patron goddess Desna, the Oasis elves delight in traveling where whim takes them, and many leave their homes to wander for many years before returning to their oasis. Many Vourinoi also believe in the elven philosophy known as the Brightness, a belief that their current life is but one in a series, and that upon death they are reincarnated as another creature. Searching for one's brightness, a beautiful, ecstatic moment of enlightenment leading them to a higher destiny, is a common goal in their wanderings. The Mualijae, or Jungle Elves. Mualijae are jungle-dwelling elves who reside in the Mwangi Expanse, enigmas to most due to their dislike of trespassers. Guardians and stewards of their homelands, Mualijae were among those elves who did not depart Golarion during the Earthfall, and their legends claim they remained behind to protect the world in the dark days to come. Mualijae elves have the dark skin and black hair of their human neighbors, and they usually possess jet black eyes. Individual variations are common, however, such as rose gold hair or glowing orange eyes. Fashion varies wildly between nations, but Mualijae tend to favor garb made from plants and wood, as well as natural materials such as bone, fur, and leathers. Mualijae long ago split into three subgroups: the Alijae of the northern Mwangi Hills with dark brown skin and coily dark brown hair, the Ekujae of the southwestern Mwangi lands, who tend towards dark skin and eyes, but are prone to individual variation from these norms, and the Kalijae of the northwestern Mwangi, who have straighter hair than their kin and are seen only rarely outside their own lands. The Drow, or Darkland Elves, or Subterranean Elves. Some of the elves that remained on Golarion during the Earthfall survived by venturing into tunnels that led deep underground. Over the last 10,000 years, the descendants of these elves have become the Drow. Drow have a distinctive appearance, which includes dark purple or dark blue skin and shock white or silver hair. They have evolved a form of dark vision that allows them to see clearly in conditions of total darkness. Whatever ancient horrors live in the Darklands began to affect them, or perhaps it was the influence of the horrible bound god Rovagog. Regardless, the Drow that settled in the Darklands, with a few rare exceptions, tend towards communities that are bitter, twisted, and evil. The Drow have become sinister territorial slavers, and they tend to clash violently with their surface brethren, whom they feel no love or kinship towards. Some Drow have recognized the folly of their ways, and they have retreated from their broken culture, trying to find a home for themselves on the surface, or possibly in isolation, away from the rest of their broken kindred. The Jinin, or Minkai Elves. Not all the elves who ventured into the tunnels during the Earthfall crisis became Drow. As the refugee elves delved deeper into the Darklands, one among them, an oracle named Jinin, received a vision that they would find their salvation and a new home by following the roots of a silver tree back to the surface. Jinin's followers traveled under Golarion's surface for centuries, picking their way cautiously and slowly amidst the natural hazards and hostile natives of the Darklands. Eventually they reached a thick, winding vein of mithril ore, strongly reminiscent of the roots of a tree. Concluding that this was the tree from Jinin's vision, the elves followed it upwards and emerged in central Tianxia. Jinin passed away shortly thereafter, content that her people had found a new home, and the elves named their new nation Jinin in her honor. In time, Tianmin explorers from Minkai contacted the Jinin. The elves were greatly impressed by the honor, courtesy, and dutiful lifestyles of the samurai, and chose to adopt many of Minkai's cultural and political traditions, and have become a shogunate themselves. Finally, the Aquatic Elves, or Sea Elves. Aquatic elf communities can be found all over the coasts and shorelines of the innersea, and along the many snaking rivers inland. Millennia of living as fisherfolk and seafolk has changed these elves. Aquatic elves are amphibious and can breathe both on land and underwater. They have webbed hands and feet to help them swim and have adapted organs to withstand the tremendous pressures of lower depths. Not surprisingly, sea elves tend towards worshipping nature deities and water deities, including Gozere, Hanspur, and even the goddess of pirates and sea monsters, Besmara. That rounds out the common elven kindreds of Golarion. But my last note about the elves is to remind you once again that elves adjust to their environment, so these are just the larger, more common communities. An elf community in a savanna, or living by a volcano, may have other strange attributes that are not commonly encountered among the elves described here. I think this is a fun detail that makes Golarion's elves unique, and if you are playing an elf character, take a minute to really think about where and how your character has lived, and how it has shaped them.
And that's all the time we have for today. We covered all the subgroups of the elves. Hopefully I was able to go in enough detail that this was able to help you out for your elf character. If there's anything I missed or that you'd like me to talk about in more detail, please be sure to let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this content, be sure to like and subscribe, and join us next week when we talk about the Dwarves of Pathfinder.